Born Without a Wolf, Destined to Lead Them All. Part 1. The day they tested Mia Dawson for her wolf, she was 7 years old and completely unafraid. That was the part nobody talked about afterward. Not the result, everybody talked about the result. But the fact that when Elder Noah pressed his ancient weathered hands against her small shoulders and closed his eyes and reached with that deep pack sense that could feel a wolf the way you feel heat from a fire, Mia had stood perfectly still and looked straight ahead and felt nothing but curious. The other children had been nervous, shifting their weight, biting their lips, gripping their parents' hands with sweaty fingers. The wolf testing was the most important ceremony of a young shifter's life. The moment the pack officially recognized what you carried inside you, what you were going to become. Mia had thought it sounded interesting. She remembered the exact moment Elder Noah's face changed. He had been smiling. A professional, reassuring smile, the kind you give to children at important moments, and then the smile stopped. Not slowly, all at once like a candle blown out. He opened his eyes. He looked at her. He looked at her mother. He said nothing for a very long time. "What?" Mia said. "Hush," her mother said, but her voice was strange, thin, like something had punctured it. "There is no wolf," Elder Noah said quietly. To her mother, not to her. As if Mia had already become someone you spoke around rather than to. "The child carries no wolf energy. None at all. I have never felt. It is completely absent." Her mother made a sound. Just one. Small and sharp, like something breaking that had been under pressure for a long time. Mia looked between them. What does that mean? Nobody answered her. That was the first time. It would not be the last. But that was not where the story truly began. The story began 20 years later, on the night Mia Dawson walked into the Grey Pine Alpha Summit uninvited, unannounced and completely alone, and sat down at the head of the table before anyone could stop her. 7 alphas in that room. 7 of the most powerful wolf shifters in the Northern Territories, gathered around a table of dark wood in a stone hall lit by firelight, smelling of dominance and old authority, and the particular tension that filled any room where multiple apex predators were trying to be civil to each other. 7 alphas who all went very, very still when the door opened. She walked in like she owned the floor under her feet. Dark hair pulled back from her face, gray eyes steady and completely unintimidated, wearing nothing that announced power because she had learned, over 20 years of having nothing, that the most dangerous people in any room were the ones who didn't need to announce anything. She sat at the head of the table. The chair that belonged to the summit chair. The chair that rotated between alphas by seniority. The chair that was, this year, supposed to belong to Alpha Kate of North Hold, who was currently standing at the other end of the table with his hands flat on the surface and his amber eyes burning gold. "Who?" he said very quietly. "Are you?" "My name is Mia Dawson," she said. "And I have information that every person in this room needs to hear before the morning. After that, if you want me to leave, I'll leave." She looked around the table. 7 faces. 7 wolves assessing her the way wolves always assessed, for weakness, for threat, for the thing that told them where she ranked. "But I don't think you'll want me to leave." Silence. Then the alpha at the far left, a woman, silver-haired, sharp-faced, the oldest in the room, leaned back in her chair and said, "She has no wolf." "No," Mia agreed. "Then how?" the woman said slowly. "Are you sitting in that chair without every instinct I have screaming at me to remove you?" Mia looked at her steadily. "That," she said, "is exactly the right question. Hello wonderful people and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, you have arrived on a very good day. This is the place for the most emotional, the most gripping, the most absolutely impossible to stop, werewolf romance stories that exist anywhere online. I mean that. Today's story is called, Born Without a Wolf, Destined to Lead Them All. And I need you to understand something before we begin. This story is going to make you feel things. Big things. The kind of things that sit in your chest for days after you're done listening. So get comfortable. Get your drink. Get your blanket if you need it. Where are you listening from today? Drop your country in the comments right now. I read every single one and I love knowing where in the world this story is finding you. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now. One tap. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything to this channel. Alright, let's go back to Mia. Part 2. Mia Dawson grew up in Grey Pine Pack the way a stone grows up in a river, shaped by everything moving around her, worn smooth by the current, but fundamentally, stubbornly, immovably itself. Grey Pine was not a cruel pack. That was the complicated part. It would have been easier in some ways if they had been simply cruel, if the contempt had been sharp and deliberate and she could have hated them cleanly for it. Instead they were something harder to name. They were a pack that genuinely believed the things they believed, genuinely operated by the rules they operated by, and those rules simply had no category for what Mia was. Wolfless. The word covered everything. It covered why she couldn't sit in the front rows at ceremonies, why she wasn't invited to the full moon runs, Why the pack healer never bothered to learn her particular medical history because wolfless individuals didn't heal the way proper wolves did and required human doctors, which was its own kind of quiet exile. Why the alpha's daughter, a girl named Kayla, beautiful and golden-eyed and absolutely certain of her own importance, had called Mia empty skin from the time they were 8 years old and never once been corrected by an adult. Mia's mother had tried. Eva Dawson was a mid-ranking pack member. Not powerful, not influential, but present and loving and furiously proud of her daughter in a way that the pack found slightly embarrassing. She attended every ceremony Mia was technically allowed to attend. She sat in the front row. She clapped the loudest. She also, quietly and without ever making a production of it, made sure Mia had access to everything the pack's library contained. Knowledge, Eva told her daughter once. When Mia was 10 and had come home from a pack training session she'd been allowed to observe but not participate in, her jaw set and her gray eyes dry and dangerous. Knowledge is the only thing that belongs entirely to you. No one can look at it and say it doesn't count because you don't have the right kind of blood. No one can take it from you when they exile you or demote you, or put you at the back of the room. She pressed a book into Mia's hands. Pack history. Interpack accords. The laws of shifting society. Fill yourself up with it. Fill every corner. Mia had taken that instruction with a seriousness that probably should have alarmed someone. She read everything. Pack history, pack law, territorial rights, shifting biology. She read the shifting biology with particular intensity because she was trying to understand herself, trying to find some record somewhere of a case like hers, someone who had arrived in the world without a wolf and still what she wasn't sure. Still survived. Still mattered. Still found a way to be something that the world hadn't made a category for. She found 2 cases. In all of recorded pack history across thousands of years of documentation, 2 individuals born into wolf bloodlines with no wolf energy whatsoever. The first had died young, in an era when wolfless pups were considered bad omens and handled accordingly. She did not dwell on that one. The second was more interesting. A woman recorded only as the blank in the archives of the Eastern Reaches, who had lived 400 years ago and about whom the records were strange, fragmentary, clearly edited at some point, with sections removed and others added later. What remained was contradictory. In some records she was described as a disgrace, a cautionary tale, proof of what happened when bloodlines weakened. In others, records that felt older that predated the editing, she was described as something else entirely. The one who stood outside the wolf entirely and therefore could see what those inside could not. The one the pack bonds could not touch, and therefore the one the pack bonds could not blind. The blank who became the balance. Mia had read those fragments so many times she could recite them from memory. She had never told anyone about them. She had also never told anyone about the other thing she discovered about herself at age 14. Alone in the forest on a full moon night when the rest of the pack was running and she was sitting on a fallen log feeling, as she often felt on full moon nights, like the single dark pixel in a bright image. She had been watching them run, could hear them distantly howling and crashing through the underbrush with the particular joy of wolves in their element, and she had been doing the thing she always did when she watched wolves. Reading them. The way her mother had told her to look. The way she'd been doing since she was small. And she had realized slowly that she was not just seeing them. She was feeling them. Not the way a wolf felt pack bonds, not that hot direct current of shared emotion that proper wolves described, that river of feeling flowing between them. This was different. Quieter. Like a map appearing in her head. A topography of emotional states. Each wolf a different temperature. A different texture. She could feel Kayla's aggressive joy like something sharp and gold. She could feel the beta pair running side by side. Their emotional states so harmonized they were almost one tone. She could feel the elderly Gamma at the edge of the run. His wolf happy but tired. The particular weariness of a body that had shifted for 60 years. She sat on her log and felt all of them, every single one like reading a room with her eyes closed. And then she stopped, because if anyone found out she didn't know what they would do with it. So she kept it. Filed it away in the section of herself that she kept only for herself, next to the fragments about the blank who became the balance. And she went home and made tea and waited for morning. She had one friend. One absolute, non-negotiable, would follow her into any disaster friend. A young man named Theo, gamma-ranked, with bright eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the particular gift of being smarter than most people in the room while somehow making everyone feel comfortable rather than inadequate. Theo had decided to be Mia's friend when they were 9. With the same calm certainty he applied to all his decisions, and had never revisited the choice. "You're doing the quiet thing," he told her one afternoon, when they were 23 and sitting on the roof of the pack house because Theo had found a way to the roof and they both agreed it was the best thinking spot available. "I'm always quiet. You're doing the specific quiet that means you're planning something that's going to change everything," he said. He pushed his glasses up. "Want to tell me, or should I figure it out myself?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she told him about the summit. The Grey Pine Alpha Summit, the gathering that happened every 3 years, rotating between territories, where the Northern Pack Alphas met to negotiate territory, resolve disputes, and generally maintain the fragile architecture of interpack civilization. It was happening in 2 weeks. In Grey Pine territory, which was why she had access to information about it. She had been working in the pack administrative office for 4 years, because the pack gave her work that didn't require shifting, and administrative work was work nobody particularly wanted, so she had accumulated, quietly and without fanfare, an extraordinarily comprehensive knowledge of the interpack political landscape. She had also, in the last 6 months, uncovered something that was currently sitting in her stomach like a stone. "There's a conspiracy," she said. Theo said nothing. He was very good at productive silence. 3 of the 7 alphas attending the summit have been coordinating outside of official channels for the last 18 months. I found the correspondence. It came through the admin office because 2 of the letters were misdirected and should have been caught before they reached the general files, but they weren't. She pulled out a folded paper from her jacket. Theo looked at it. They're planning to use the summit to push through a new territorial accord. One that would consolidate the northern territories under a 3-pack authority. Which sounds administrative and boring until you read the fine print, which gives those 3 packs control over everything. Resources. Movement rights. Who can establish new pack territory? Who can be exiled? Who counts? She paused. The 4 smaller packs at the summit don't know. If this accord passes, they lose autonomy. They become client packs. Dependent. Theo looked at the paper for a long time. "And our alpha," he said carefully, "is one of the 3 coordinating." "Yes. So you can't bring this to him." "No. And you can't bring it to the other Grey Pine leadership because they're loyal to him." "No. So what are you going to do?" She looked at him steadily. "I'm going to walk into that summit and sit at the head of the table, and tell every alpha in the room what I know before the accord gets pushed through." Theo took his glasses off, cleaned them, put them back on. This was what he did when processing information that required extra consideration. "Mia," he said. "I know. You are wolfless. They will feel that the moment you walk in. I know. 7 alphas. In a room. Together. I know, Theo. And your plan is to just sit down," she said, "and tell the truth. Before they can decide, I don't have the right to." She met his gaze. "Someone has to. And I'm the only one who knows. And I have spent 23 years being told I don't have the right to exist in rooms that were built for wolves." She folded the paper back up. "I've decided I'm done asking for the right." Theo looked at her for a very long moment. Then, "I'm coming with you." "You absolutely are not. If they trace this back to a Grey Pine pack member, then I'll deal with that," he said simply. "You're not walking into 7 alphas alone." He paused. "Well, you are, actually, because you'll walk in first and I'll be outside the door in case everything goes catastrophically wrong. But I'm coming." She looked at him. "Okay," she said. "Good." He stood up. "Now tell me the rest of the plan." "That is the plan." He stared at her. "That's it? Walk in, sit down, talk." "The truth is the plan," she said. "It's always been the plan. I've just been waiting until I had enough of it." Part 3. She walked into the summit at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. She had timed it deliberately. Late enough that the alphas would be settled, comfortable, into the rhythm of the evening session. Past the point of high alert, not yet tired enough to be irritable. The window of maximum receptivity, as much as such a thing existed for 7 apex predators. Theo was outside with his phone and strict instructions to call the Interpack Council emergency line if she wasn't out in 45 minutes. She pushed open the heavy oak door. 7 faces turned. She walked to the head of the table and sat down. And we know what happened next. The stillness, the gold-burning eyes of Alpha Kate at the far end, the old silver-haired woman whose name she would shortly learn was Alpha Margaret of Silverpeak, asking the right question. "How are you sitting in that chair without every instinct I have screaming at me to remove you?" "That," Mia said, "is exactly the right question." She put the correspondence on the table. Not dramatically. Just set it down flat in the center where everyone could see it. "My name is Mia Dawson. I am a Grey Pine pack member. Administrative office for years. I am wolfless, completely verifiably, with no wolf energy of any kind." She looked around the table. 7 faces. 7 different calculations happening behind 7 pairs of eyes. "I know what you're feeling right now. You're trying to assess me and your instincts are giving you nothing useful because the thing your instincts read is wolf and I have none. Which means right now, in this room, I am the only one whose judgment is not being filtered through dominance hierarchy." She paused. "I need you to consider that that might be exactly why I'm the right person to tell you what I'm about to tell you." Silence. "Then, you have 30 seconds, said the alpha directly to her left. A young man, dark-skinned, with quiet eyes and the contained energy of someone who was powerful enough not to need to show it. She didn't know his name yet. "Before I decide whether to have you removed, talk." 3 of the 7 people in this room, she said. Have been coordinating outside official channels to push through an accord tomorrow that will reduce 4 of your packs to client status. She tapped the correspondence. I have the letters, the dates, the specific language of the proposed accord, which has not been shared with the full summit in advance as required by interpack law. She looked at Cade, who had gone very, very still, including the section that transfers resource rights of the neutral corridor to the 3 coordinating packs, which is not a small thing, because the neutral corridor contains the only freshwater source accessible to all northern packs without territorial permission. She held his gaze. You needed the summit to pass the accord before anyone read that section carefully. I've read it carefully. The room was absolutely silent. Then it wasn't. What followed was, by any measure, the most chaotic 40 minutes of Mia's life, which was saying something. Alpha Cade came to his feet first, with the controlled fury of someone who had been in charge long enough that being challenged felt physically wrong. The 2 other coordinating alphas, she identified them quickly by the way they moved, the split-second coordination, the shared glance, rose with him. On the other side of the table, 3 of the 4 remaining alphas were reaching for the correspondence with hands that were not entirely steady. The young alpha to her left, she learned his name when Margaret said it sharply across the chaos. Ethan. Look at the dates. Picked up the letters and read them with the focused silence of someone assembling a very unpleasant picture. Alpha Ethan of Ravenwood. She had read about him. Young 28, the youngest alpha in the Northern Territories in living memory. Had taken leadership of Ravenwood 3 years ago after his father's death and had, by all accounts, been doing something unusual with it. Building alliances based on what he called cooperative sovereignty rather than dominance hierarchy. Getting results that the older alphas found confusing and slightly threatening. He read the letters. All of them. Set them down. Looked at Cade. Did you write these? He said. His voice was absolutely level. Cade's jaw worked. This is an ambush. This wolfless girl has clearly been put up to. Did you write them? Ethan said again. Not louder. Just more. More silence. More weight. More of that contained quality that she'd noticed when she first walked in and that she was now, with her particular gift running quietly in the background, reading more precisely. This was a man who had chosen, deliberately and with full self-awareness, to carry power differently. To hold it without letting it hold him. She felt it like a clear, cool tone in her internal map of the room. Different from every other alpha present. The others were hot and turbulent and spiking with dominance and anger and calculation. Ethan was steady. Clear. Like a bell that had been struck and was simply, fully ringing. The letters will be verified, Margaret said, cutting through everything with the authority of decades. She had picked up her own copy and was reading with spectacles now produced from somewhere. By the council legal team. Tonight. She looked at Cade over her spectacles. You will not leave this hall until that process begins. She looked at Mia. And you, she said. Will stay. Of course, Mia said. Cade pointed at her. She has no right to be in this room. She has no standing. She's wolfless. She's a low-ranking pack member. She, Margaret said with the absolute finality of someone who had ended more arguments than Cade had started, brought us evidence of a conspiracy that would have altered the power structure of every pack in this room by morning. She set down her papers. I find her standing to be self-evident. Took 4 hours. The council legal team arrived at midnight. The letters were verified. The ink, the paper, the specific phrasing that matched Cade's documented communication style from existing records. 2 of the other coordinating alphas, reading the room and calculating their odds, began cooperating with the verification process in the particular way that people cooperate when they've decided the ship is sinking and they want to be seen swimming rather than going down with it. Mia sat through all of it. At the side of the room now, not the head of the table, she had moved voluntarily once the crisis phase began, because she understood instinctively that once the information was delivered, her role changed. She was a witness now, not a catalyst. She sat and watched and ran her quiet internal map and thought. At 2 in the morning, Ethan sat down beside her. She had felt him moving toward her before he arrived. That clear, cool, bell-tone quality, approaching through the noise of the room. You timed your entrance deliberately, he said. Not an accusation. An observation. Yes. You knew exactly what the room would do and you used it. I knew what the information would do, she said. The room just had to receive it. He looked at her with dark eyes that were doing something she recognized. Actually assessing. Not rank checking, not dominance mapping. Actually looking at who she was. How long have you been building this case? He said. 6 months formally. 23 years informally. A pause. What does that mean? She considered. It means that I have spent my entire life in pack spaces being told I don't belong in them. And what that gives you, if you pay attention, is an education in how those spaces actually work versus how they're supposed to work. Because you're never inside the current. You're always on the bank watching. She paused. You see things differently from the bank. He was quiet for a moment. The other alphas are going to want to know how you got in, he said. I walked in, she said. They're going to want to understand why their instincts didn't reject you. Because their instincts are built to read wolves, she said. And I'm not one. I'm not lower ranked. I'm not a threat. I'm not a rival. I'm simply outside the system entirely. And the system has no automatic response to that. Another quiet moment. What do you want? He said. From tonight. What were you hoping for? She thought about it honestly. I wanted the accord stopped. I wanted the 4-packs that would have lost their autonomy to keep it. She paused. And I wanted, she stopped. What? I wanted to sit at that table, she said quietly. Just once. And have no one move me. He looked at her for a long time. No one moved you, he said. No, she said. They didn't. Part 4. She went home at dawn. Theo was waiting outside the hall, sitting on the stone steps with his knees pulled up, head tipped back against the wall, asleep in the way that only people with very clear consciences can sleep sitting up. She touched his shoulder and he woke immediately, glasses askew, and looked at her with the particular expression of someone running rapid triage on another person's well-being. You're intact, he said. Completely. The accord. Dead. He closed his eyes. Exhaled. Okay. He opened them again. Cade. Being investigated by the council legal team as of about an hour ago. And you. She sat down on the step beside him. The dawn was cold and blue-gray, the air sharp with pine and frost. Somewhere above them a bird was doing something very early and optimistic. I'm okay, she said. And meant it, which was interesting. Theo, I sat at that table and no one moved me. He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. The professional assessment dropped away and what was underneath it was simpler and more honest. Pride. The particular kind that comes from watching someone you love do the thing they were built to do. I know, he said. I was outside. I could feel it from out here. He paused. Well, you know what I mean. She knew what he meant. The same thing she'd been feeling her whole life. The sense of something changing in a room, even at a distance, even through walls. Some people felt it and called it atmosphere. Some called it energy. She had a name for it that she kept private. We have a problem, she said. We have several problems, Mia. Could you be more specific? Kate is going to look for who gave me the letters. The misdirected correspondence came through our admin office. It'll take him about 48 hours to trace the path to me, even with the council investigation slowing him down. She looked at the lightning sky. I can't go back to Grey Pine. Theo was silent for a moment. Right, he said. And you. I'm not going back either, he said simply. He'll look for you through me. I'd rather be a moving target. He paused. Do you have a plan? I'm working on one. That's not a yes. It's a strong maybe. The plan, such as it was, took shape over the next 2 days in a small inn on the edge of Grey Pine territory, technically neutral ground, the kind of place that catered to traveling pack members and asked no questions and kept no detailed records because that was good for business. She thought about the summit, about what had happened in that room and why, about the thing she'd felt when she walked in, the thing that the silver-haired Margaret had named so precisely. How are you sitting in that chair without every instinct I have screaming at me to remove you? Because the instincts of wolves were calibrated to a system. And the system had a fundamental weakness that she had spent 23 years inadvertently studying. It could only see what it expected to see. Dominance or submission. Alpha or omega. Wolf or not wolf, and if not wolf then irrelevant. She was not in the system. Which meant she could move through it in ways that the system couldn't track. She was thinking about this on the morning of the second day when a knock came at the in-room door. She opened it. Ethan of Ravenwood stood in the hallway. Alone, no escort, in clothes that looked like he'd been traveling, with the characteristic containedness that she was beginning to understand was not a performance but simply how he was built. He held up both hands in the universal gesture of non-aggression, which she found both sensible and slightly endearing given that he was objectively one of the 7 most powerful wolves in the Northern Territories. How did you find me? She said. You were the only person at the summit last night whose exit the security cameras couldn't track beyond a certain point, he said. Which meant you were either very lucky or very deliberate. And I'd concluded you were rarely either one randomly. He paused. The innkeeper recognized the description. She stepped back from the door. He came in. Theo, from the corner where he'd been reading, looked over the top of his book, assessed, and went back to reading with the air of someone who had decided this was not immediately his problem. I'm going to ask you something directly, Ethan said. Good, she said. I prefer direct. Do you have somewhere to go? Somewhere safe outside Grey Pine's reach, where you can be while the council investigation runs its course. She was quiet for a moment. Honest answer, no. She had the inn for 3 more days and after that she had the equivalent of 2 months' savings and a very good knowledge of pack law, and no particular idea what came next. No, she said. Ravenwood would like to offer you sanctuary, he said. She looked at him carefully. Why? Because what you did last night preserved the autonomy of 4 packs, including mine. Because the evidence you brought to that table was assembled at personal risk over 6 months. Because you are clearly remarkable. He said it matter-of-factly, not as flattery, the way you describe a geological feature or an unusual weather pattern. Just, this is what I observe. And because I think you have more to contribute to the interpack political situation than one very dramatic entrance at a summit. He held her gaze. I'd like to know what else you see from the bank. That last sentence landed differently than the rest. She had said that to him. You see things differently from the bank. At 2 in the morning in a room full of chaos, and he had remembered it exactly and used it back at her like a key. What would sanctuary at Ravenwood look like? She said. A home. A role if you want one, I mean that seriously, not as a gesture. Full pack protection. He paused. And the space to be what you are, whatever that turns out to be. Another pause, shorter. Without anyone telling you what that should be. She looked at him for a long moment. She looked at Theo. Theo turned a page. Tell me about Ravenwood, she said. He told her. Over the next 2 hours, in the small inn room with the cold morning light coming through the window, Ethan Cross talked about his pack the way people talk about things they have genuinely built and genuinely love, with precision and without performance, noting both what worked and what didn't, neither overstating nor underselling. Ravenwood was mid-sized. 300 wolves, 20-odd humans and non-shifters who had come in through mate bonds or family connections or, in a few cases, simply because Ravenwood had a reputation for being different. The cooperative sovereignty principle that the other alphas found confusing was not, as some assumed, idealism. It was strategy. Ethan had concluded, after careful observation, that dominance hierarchy was an efficient system for organizing immediate threat response and a catastrophically inefficient system for everything else. So he'd kept the hierarchy for the things it was good at and built different structures for the things it wasn't. What kind of different structures? She said. A council, he said. Not just the traditional elder council. A mixed council, wolves and non-shifters ranked and unranked. Decisions about pack resources, territory use, community matters, those go through the council, not through me alone. He paused. I have final authority in security matters. In everything else I have a vote like everyone else plus a tiebreak. She stared at him. The other alphas must hate that. Most of them think it's a phase, he said. They're waiting for me to come to my senses. Something moved in his expression, dry, not quite a smile. Meanwhile, Ravenwood's internal conflict rate has dropped by 60% in 3 years, and our population has grown faster than any other northern pack. He looked at her steadily. Power through connection rather than dominance. It turns out it works. She thought about the fragments in the old archives. The one who stood outside the wolf entirely and therefore could see what those inside could not. She thought about 23 years of watching from the bank. Your council, she said. Are there non-shifters on it currently? 2. Both joined through mate bonds. He paused. Why? Because if you're serious about what you're building, she said carefully, you might want someone who isn't there because they're attached to someone else. Someone who's there on their own terms. Who sees the pack dynamics from outside the wolf system entirely. She met his eyes. Someone who cannot be co-opted by the dominance hierarchy because they don't exist within it. The room was quiet. Theo turned another page. Yes, Ethan said after a moment. I might want exactly that. He looked at her with those steady dark eyes. Is that a yes to Ravenwood? She thought about it. About the inn and the 3 days and the 2 months savings. About Kate and the 48 hours. About the head of the table and no one moving her. About the fragments. The blank who became the balance. Yes, she said. That's a yes to Ravenwood. Are you still with me? Because this story is only just beginning to get good. Drop a comment and tell me what you think of Mia so far. And if you haven't subscribed, now is the time, because where we're going next is going to absolutely floor you. Part 5. Ravenwood surprised her. She had formed a picture of it from Ethan's description. Practical, structured, intentional. She'd expected something that felt managed. Efficient in the way of things that have been carefully designed. What she found was something warmer than that. The pack house was large and slightly chaotic in the way of places that were genuinely lived in. Pups running through hallways, someone always in the kitchen, a complicated ongoing argument about the herb garden that apparently involved half the pack and had been going on for 6 months. The wolves moved with the easy confidence of animals who didn't need to perform their status because their status wasn't in question. The non-shifters, and there were more of them than she'd expected, a whole quiet subculture operating comfortably within the pack structure, moved with the same ease. Nobody looked at her wolflessness and recalibrated their expression. Or rather, they noticed. Of course they noticed. Wolves always noticed. But the noticing didn't lead where she'd spent 23 years watching it lead. It didn't lead to the subtle repositioning, the slight edge of dismissal, the automatic ranking that placed her below whatever came above nothing. It led mostly to curiosity. "You're the one from the summit," a young woman said on her second day. Red-haired, freckled, hands perpetually stained with what turned out to be dye from a textile project. Her name was Lily. "I heard you just walked in and sat down." "I did," Mia said. "That's incredible," Lily said, with the wholehearted admiration of someone who had no reason to be guarded about it. "I would have been terrified." "Weren't you terrified?" "A little," Mia said honestly. "But you did it anyway." Lily nodded as if this confirmed something. "Yeah, Ethan said you were interesting." She paused. "He doesn't say that about people very often. He says most people are understandable, which I think is his polite way of saying predictable." She tilted her head. "He said you were interesting specifically." Mia filed that away. She filed a lot of things away over the first 2 weeks. She settled into Ravenwood the way she had always settled into spaces, quietly by making herself useful, by paying close attention and then applying what she paid attention to. She started attending the mixed council meetings, first as an observer, then because June, the senior non-shifter council member, recognized her administrative background and drafted her immediately as a participant. The council was extraordinary. Not because it was perfect, it was messy and sometimes frustrating, with the particular friction that comes from genuinely different perspectives trying to reach actual consensus rather than having consensus imposed from the top. But that friction produced something. Real decisions. Decisions that had been actually tested against multiple viewpoints before being made. Decisions that people would follow not because they were afraid of what happened if they didn't, but because they'd been part of making them. She watched Ethan in these meetings with particular attention. He was not what she'd have predicted from an alpha. He didn't perform authority. He didn't need the room to feel his dominance, seemed if anything mildly inconvenienced when it manifested. He asked more questions than he made statements. He changed his mind in public, which was apparently something that other alphas found catastrophically undignified, and he did it without apparent self-consciousness, simply, "I thought that, I heard this, I think differently now." He also, she noticed, watched her. Not constantly, not obtrusively, but in the way that people watch things that interest them, with attention that came back repeatedly to rest. She noticed. Her gift noticed. His tone in her internal map was always that clear, cool bell sound. But when she was in the room, it shifted slightly, a warmth at the edges, a small but unmistakable brightening, like a light turning up a degree. She had no practical use for this information. She cataloged it anyway. 3 weeks into her time at Ravenwood, everything changed. She was in the archive room. Ravenwood had an extraordinary collection, centuries of pack records, and June had given her access with the cheerful confidence of someone who was delighted to have another person who found old records genuinely exciting, when she found it. Not a letter this time. A journal. Old. Much older than anything she'd found in the Grey Pine archives. The cover was dark leather, worn smooth, and on the inside cover, in handwriting so old the ink had gone brown, a record of the blank years. Written by Nora, called The Balance, in the 17th year of the Cooperative Accord. Her hands went very still. The blank who became the balance. Here. In Ravenwood's archives. She read for 3 hours without moving. The journal was extraordinary. Written in a voice that was precise and a little wry and deeply fiercely alive. A woman who had lived 400 years ago and who had been, in every meaningful way, Mia's predecessor. Born wolfless into a wolf pack. Surviving on the margins. Paying attention. And then finding something. Nora had not had a wolf. But she had had something else. Something she described in the journal as the other hearing. The ability to feel the emotional and energetic states of those around her. Not just wolves. Everyone. More accurately than wolf sense, because wolf sense was filtered through dominance hierarchy. Through the pack bond's tendency to amplify group feeling and suppress individual discord. What Nora felt was unfiltered. True. I hear the wolf bonds as a kind of music, she wrote. But I hear the music differently than those inside it. I hear each instrument separately, where they hear only the chord. They cannot hear the instrument that is out of tune. I can. Mia sat back. Read it again. They cannot hear the instrument that is out of tune. She thought about the summit. About the 7 alphas in that room and what she'd felt. The hot turbulence of Cade and his collaborators. The different temperature of the uninvolved alphas. The clear bell of Ethan. She had read the room completely before she'd said a word. She had known within minutes of sitting down, exactly who was involved and exactly who wasn't. Not from their faces, not from their words, but from the map her gift had drawn. The blank who became the balance. Balance between what? She kept reading. And found the answer on the 47th page. In a passage that made the back of her neck go cold with something that was not quite fear and not quite recognition but was something between the two. A feeling like standing at the edge of something enormous and looking down. There is a reason the wolfless are born, Nora had written. I have spent 17 years believing it was an accident. A failure of bloodline, a weakness, an absence. I was wrong. The wolf bonds are a great gift. They create community. They create belonging. They create the warmth that makes pack possible. But every gift has a shadow. The pack bond, followed without question, has led wolves to atrocity. Has let a bad alpha lead 100 loyal wolves into destruction because the bond itself said, follow, trust, obey. The wolfless cannot follow the bond. Cannot be swept up in the current of pack feeling when the current runs toward a cliff. We are the ones who can say stop. We are the ones who can see the cliff. That is not an absence. That is a purpose. Mia sat in the archive room for a long time after that. Then she went to find Ethan. She found him at the river, which was apparently where he went when he needed to think, standing on the bank watching the water run with his hands in his pockets, and that quality of absolute stillness he had that she'd come to understand was not blankness but presence. He was fully there, fully in the moment, just quietly. She sat down on a rock nearby. I found Nora's journal, she said. He turned. Something moved through his expression, quick, complex. Ah, he said. You knew it was there. I knew it was there. You didn't tell me. I thought you should find it yourself, he said. When you were ready. He came and sat down across from her. What did you think? She looked at him. You've read it. 3 times, he said. I found it when I was 17. Before my father died. Before I was alpha. He paused. It's part of why I built Ravenwood the way I built it. Nora's idea of cooperative sovereignty. It's not mine originally. I just tried to implement it in a modern context. He held her gaze. She believed that the healthiest pack structure was one that created space for the wolfless perspective, alongside the wolf perspective. That they needed each other. That the pack bond without the check of the unbound view was always going to be vulnerable to the things she described. He paused. The instrument's out of tune. The cooperative accord she mentions, Mia said. 17th year. What happened to it? His jaw tightened. It collapsed in the 20th year. The coordinating alpha at the time decided cooperative governance was inefficient. He dissolved the mixed council. Exiled the wolfless members. He met her eyes. There were 7 of them. All with the same gift you have. All removed simultaneously, before they could coordinate a response. 7 wolfless members, all with the gift, all removed at once. She thought about the summit. 7 alphas. 3 coordinating. How many wolfless are there currently, she said slowly, in the northern pack territories? Something in his expression told her the answer before he gave it. 8, he said. That we know of. 1 in Ravenwood, that's you now. The others are scattered across the 6 other northern packs. He paused. Including 3 in Cade's pack. She was very still. Cade exiled me, she said. Cade tried to push through an accord that would have consolidated his power over 6 other packs. Ethan's voice was level. And in the 3 months before the summit, the 3 wolfless members of his pack were all quietly reassigned to remote duties, away from the administrative center, away from pack communications. He met her eyes. Away from information. The shape of it landed in her chest like a cold stone. He knew, she said. He knew about the gift. About what the wolfless can do. And he moved them out of the way before he made his play. Yes, Ethan said. I believe so. He didn't move me because he'd already dismissed me, she said. I was in the admin office but I was wolfless. He didn't think I was a threat. He underestimated you. Everyone underestimates me, she said. And it came out with 23 years in it. All the rooms, all the back row seats, all the empty skin and Ghost Girl and nothing, all the empty skin. She stopped. Breathe. Ethan, she said. If Cade knew about the gift, if this is not accidental, if there is active suppression of wolfless individuals across the territories, then the 8 of us are in danger, he said quietly. And the packs that don't have wolfless members advising them are vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation Cade attempted. He looked at her with those steady dark eyes. Which is why I came to find you at the inn. Not only because of what you did at the summit. He paused. Because I've been looking for the right person to help me find the others. The other 7. Before whoever is coordinating this finds them first. She looked at him. The river ran. Tell me everything you know, she said. Part 6. They worked fast. They had to. The council investigation into Cade was moving, but investigations moved on their own timeline, and whatever coordination was happening among the packs that wanted wolfless individuals suppressed was not waiting for legal process. Mia and Ethan mapped it together over 3 days of intense work, pack records, territorial histories, the patterns of wolfless individuals across the northern packs over the last 50 years. How many there had been. What had happened to them. The suspiciously consistent pattern of exile, early death, or quiet erasure from pack records. This has been going on for a long time, Theo said on the 3rd day. He had his laptop open and was running the numbers with the particular focus of someone who had decided a problem was interesting. The suppression pattern predates Cade. It goes back at least 30 years. Multiple packs. Multiple alphas. They coordinate, Mia said. They coordinate, he confirmed. It's not a conspiracy exactly. There's no formal organization. It's more like a shared understanding. A shared interest in maintaining the status quo. He looked up. Wolfless individuals with the empathic gift are a structural threat to dominance hierarchy. Every alpha who benefits from dominance hierarchy has an interest in them not being in positions of influence. And the way they maintain it, Ethan said quietly, is by making sure the wolfless never know what they are. Never find each other. Never understand that the thing they experience as a personal deficiency is actually a gift, Mia said. A structural counterweight. Yes. She thought of herself at 14, alone on a log in the forest, discovering the thing she could do and immediately, instinctively hiding it. Because she had already learned, without anyone telling her explicitly, that things she had which others didn't were not celebrated. They were confiscated. She thought of Nora, writing in her journal 400 years ago. I have spent 17 years believing it was an accident. We need to find the other 7, she said. Now. Before. The door opened. It was June, the council member, and her face was wrong, professionally controlled but wrong underneath, the way faces go when someone is carrying news they don't want to carry. There's a message, she said. From the council legal team. About the investigation. She handed it to Ethan. He read it. Passed it to Mia. Kate had filed a counter-complaint. Against Mia specifically. Claiming that the correspondence she'd brought to the summit had been obtained illegally. That she had stolen PAC documents, violated Grey Pine administrative protocols, and that as a Grey Pine PAC member she had no authorization to share internal documents with external parties regardless of their content. The complaint was technically constructed well enough that the council legal team was required to investigate it before proceeding with the main case. Which meant the main case was paused. Which meant Kate had time. He's going to use it, she said. The pause. He's going to. He already has, June said. She pulled out a second message. 40 minutes ago, Kate filed formal exile papers for 3 Grey Pine PAC members. All administrative staff. She paused. All wolfless. The room went very quiet. 3 people. 3 people who hadn't done anything except work in an office and exist in a PAC that had decided, now that their existence was inconvenient. He's cleaning house, Theo said. He's eliminating witnesses, Ethan said. If those 3 are exiled before the main investigation concludes, their testimony is compromised. They can be framed as disgruntled exiles with an agenda. His jaw was tight. It's exactly what was done to the 7 in Nora's time. I have to go, Mia said. Everyone looked at her. I have to go to Grey Pine. To those 3 people. Before the exile is executed. Mia. They don't know what they are, she said. They don't know why this is happening to them. They're about to be driven into the dark by wolves they've served their whole lives, and they don't even know why. She looked at Ethan. I know why. And if I can get to them before the exile is executed. It's Grey Pine territory, he said. If you step back on Grey Pine ground, Kate can arrest you. He can try, she said. Mia. His voice was careful. This is not just dramatic. He has legal standing to detain you as a suspected document thief, pending the counter-complaint investigation. And if he detains you, then the main case loses its primary witness, she said. I know the risk. She met his eyes. But those 3 people. We'll go through official channels. Emergency council injunction to pause the exile. That takes 48 hours minimum. The exile is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Silence. She could see him calculating. Working through it. Trying to find the version of this that didn't involve her walking back into Grey Pine territory. I'm going, she said quietly. He looked at her. Something happened in his expression, the calculation dropped away and what was underneath it was simple and human and had nothing to do with strategy. Not alone, he said. Ethan. Not alone. His voice was absolutely final. Ravenwood escort. Official capacity. If Cade moves on you on Grey Pine ground with a Ravenwood Alpha present as witness, he creates an interpack incident that the council cannot ignore. He held her gaze. That's the only version of this I'll agree to. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They left at dawn. The thing that went wrong they didn't anticipate. They were an hour from Grey Pine territory, moving through the neutral forest strip, when they walked into a trap. Not a crude one. A sophisticated one, the kind that required advanced knowledge of their route, their timing, their numbers. Someone had told Cade they were coming. Someone had told him precisely enough that the wolves he'd sent, a dozen in full shift, silent in the tree line, were positioned exactly right. They came from 3 sides simultaneously. The Ravenwood escort. 4 wolves, all experienced, shifted immediately. The clearing exploded into motion and sound and the particular chaos of a wolf engagement. bodies moving faster than the human eye tracked cleanly. Mia, who could not shift, stood in the center of it and did the only thing she could do. She opened her gift completely. Not the careful, controlled version. Not the background map. She ran quietly. Fully, completely, with no filter. She opened herself to the entire situation and felt it all at once. The Ravenwood Wolves' focused determination. The Grey Pine attackers' aggression with something underneath it that was fear. Actual fear. They were afraid of her. Not of the escort. Of her. And she felt something else. 3 distinct tones off to her left through the trees. Distinct from the engaged wolves. Quieter. Lighter. Wolfless. The 3 Grey Pine pack members. They were here. Being moved, being escorted toward the exile border, probably simultaneously, to make sure they were out of reach before Mia arrived. She ran. She heard Ethan shout her name behind her. She ran anyway. Through the trees, following the 3 tones on her internal map like a compass needle. And she broke into a small clearing to find exactly what she'd felt. 3 people. 2 women, 1 man, all young, all in pack work clothes. Being escorted by 2 wolves in human form with expressions that combine discomfort and determination in the way of people following orders they don't love. The 3 exiles saw her. Their faces. She would remember their faces for a long time afterward. The shock. The recognition. One of the women had clearly been crying. "Stop," Mia said to the escorts. They looked at her with the assessment of wolves looking at a wolfless woman and finding nothing to fear. "You have no authority here," one said. "You're an exile yourself." "I am," she said. "I know exactly what that feels like. And I know exactly why he's doing this to them." She looked at the 3 people being escorted. "You don't know why, do you? You think it's something you did. Something you failed at. Some reason related to your work or your rank or something specific that you can't quite identify because none of it makes sense." The woman who had been crying went very still. "He's doing it," Mia said, "because of what you are. What you can do. Because you are wolfless and that makes you dangerous to him and he knows it and you don't. And that asymmetry is his greatest advantage." She held their gaze. "Your gift, the thing you feel, the way you can read a room, feel other people's states, you have it, don't you? You've been hiding it because you learned the same way I learned that things like that don't get celebrated. They get taken." Complete silence in the clearing. One of the escorts looked uncertain. Wavering. She felt it on her map. The other was about to move toward her when a sound came from the trees. Ethan. He came out of the forest with 2 of his escort wolves, and his face was a study in controlled fury. At Cade, she understood, not at her. And he looked at the escort wolves with the specific quality of an alpha looking at wolves who are doing something wrong and are about to be given the opportunity to stop. "This exile," he said very quietly, "is suspended pending Interpack Council review. That is not a request." The escort wolves looked at each other. They stood down. But the worst was coming. And it came that night. They were back at Ravenwood, the 3 rescued Grey Pine members installed in guest rooms, the escort wolves debriefed, Mia sitting at the council table with tea going cold in front of her and the weight of the day on her like a physical thing, when the message arrived. From the Interpack Council. The counter-complaint had been reviewed. Due to the document theft allegation and the complexity of the evidentiary questions, the council had decided to pause the main investigation and convene a formal hearing. Both parties, Cade and Mia, were required to present before the full council in person. In 1 week. In the neutral hall at Valemount. Where there would be, not 8 alphas, but the full 30-member Interpack Council. Elders, legal counsel, representatives from every major pack territory in the northern and central regions. The whole architecture of wolf governance. Watching. And Mia would need to stand there wolfless, exiled, accused of document theft, and make the case not just for the conspiracy she'd uncovered but for the legitimacy of her own existence in the spaces where these decisions were made. She stared at the message. She thought about Nora in her 17th year writing. "I have spent 17 years believing it was an accident." She thought about her mother, pressing books into her hands. "Fill yourself up with it. Fill every corner." She thought about being 7 years old and standing very still while Elder Noah's face changed. She thought about being 14 and alone on a log in the forest, feeling 50 wolves running and understanding, for the first time, that her so-called absence was actually a different kind of presence. She thought about walking through the oak door of the summit hall, and sitting down at the head of the table, and no one moving her. 1 week, she said. Ethan across the table looked at her steadily. 1 week. Then we have 1 week to build the case that we should have had months to build. She looked at him. I need the journal. I need Theo's data on the historical suppression pattern. I need the testimony of the 3 Grey Pine members. I need Aaron, or any Ravenmore witness who can speak to the broader coordination. She paused. And I need the other 7. As many as we can reach in 7 days. She held his gaze. If I walk into that council hearing alone, I'm one wolfless woman making accusations against an established alpha. If I walk in with 8 wolfless individuals, with a historical record going back 400 years, with documented suppression patterns across multiple packs. You're not an anomaly, he said quietly. You're evidence of a system. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. That clear, warm, bell-tone quality on her map, burning steady. We'll find them, he said. Part 7. They found 5 of the 7 in 6 days. 2 were unreachable. 1 was in a pack so controlled by its alpha that outside communication was nearly impossible, and 1 had apparently anticipated trouble and gone into self-imposed isolation somewhere in the Central Territories. But 5 was enough. They arrived at Ravenwood one by one over the course of the week, each one a different story and the same story. A young man named Eli from the Thornfield pack who had been working as a cartographer and had been quietly passed over for every advancement in 10 years, who had come in the door and sat down at the council table and said, with the exhausted relief of someone finally naming a long unnamed thing, I always thought there was something wrong with me. A woman named Nora, she had gone very still when she heard that name in the journal briefly before composing herself. From the Silver Run pack, Healer's assistant, who had the gift so strongly that she'd spent years thinking she was losing her mind because she couldn't turn it off. A teenage boy from a small eastern pack, barely 17, brought by his mother who had driven through the night because she'd heard through the network Ethan had activated that there was a place her son might be safe. Mia sat with each of them. She did not have a speech. She had the journal which she let them read, and she had her own story which she told simply, and she had the truth which was that what they experienced was not a flaw but a function, not an absence but a different kind of presence. She watched them receive it. The young cartographer put the journal down after reading the first 20 pages and sat in silence for a very long time and then said, My mother cried when I was born without a wolf. I have never forgiven myself for that. It wasn't yours to forgive, she told him. He nodded. Once, something in his face changed. The girl Nora, 22 from Silver Run, read the whole journal overnight. Came to find Mia in the morning with red eyes and the particular composure of someone who has done their grieving and is now ready to do something else. Tell me about the hearing, she said. Tell me what you can do first, Mia said. What Nora could do was extraordinary. Her gift was not just empathic reading, she explained haltingly, under the right conditions project. Not thoughts, not words, but emotional clarity. She could settle a room, could take a space vibrating with confusion and competition and introduce, into it, a tone of genuine attentiveness, like tuning an instrument. You've never told anyone, Mia said. I was afraid of what they'd do with it, Nora said. I know. Mia paused. Do you trust me? I've known you for 12 hours, Nora said. I know, Mia said again. But do you trust me? A pause. A very careful internal check that Mia could feel happening, the quality of someone consulting something deeper than their surface mind. Yes, Nora said. Then I want you in that room with me, Mia said. Not to manipulate the outcome, to help people listen. There's a difference. She held Nora's gaze. Cade's advantage has always been the dominance hierarchy, the way it makes wolves defer before they've even assessed the actual argument. Not because they're stupid, because the system is designed to move faster than conscious thought. If you can help slow that down, just enough for the argument to be heard. I can do that, Nora said quietly. The night before the hearing, Ethan found her in the archive room. She was reading the journal again. Not looking for new information, she'd memorized it. She was reading for something else. For the particular quality of Nora's voice in those pages. 400 years old, still clear, still alive. We are the ones who can say stop. We are the ones who can see the cliff. Ethan sat beside her at the long table. For a while neither of them spoke. I want to tell you something, he said eventually. All right, she said. When I read the journal at 17, when I understood what Nora was describing, what the wolfless gift was, what it meant for pack structure, I started building Ravenwood with one idea in the back of my mind. He looked at the journal in her hands. That someday if I built it right, if I made the space genuinely safe, someone like Nora would come here. Someone who knew what they were, and was ready to help build what she described. He paused. I waited 11 years. She was quiet. And then you walked into a summit and sat at the head of the table, he said. And Margaret asked how you were doing it and you said that's exactly the right question and he stopped. Started again. I felt something. Not wolf sense. Something else. Something that didn't have a category in the system I'd been operating in. He looked at her steadily. I think you probably felt it too. She had felt it. She had felt it that night and filed it away in the section of herself she kept only for herself, with all the other things that were too big and too true to look at directly. Ethan, she said carefully. I'm not saying this to complicate tomorrow, he said quickly. I know tomorrow is the only thing that matters right now. I'm saying it because, he paused. Because you spent 23 years in a pack that didn't see you. And I want you to know that I see you. Completely. Whatever happens tomorrow. He held her gaze. Not as the wolfless girl who sat at the summit table. Not as the person who found Nora's journal or built the case or brought the others here. He paused. Just you, Mia, who was curious when she should have been afraid. Who kept the thing she could do quietly for years waiting for somewhere safe to put it. His voice was very steady. I see that person. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about her mother saying fill yourself up with it. She thought about the log by the river at 14 and the 50 wolves running and the things she'd understood and hidden. She thought about 23 years of being the stone in the current, shaped but not swept away. She thought about what it felt like to be seen. Really seen. Not assessed, not measured. Not found lacking in the category of wolf. Just seen. After tomorrow, she said. He almost smiled. After tomorrow, he agreed. She put her hand over his on the table. He turned it over. Held on. They sat like that until the archive room got cold, reading Nora's journal together by lamplight. Two people at the edge of something enormous, looking at it without looking away. Part 8. The neutral hall at Valemount was larger than she remembered. Or perhaps it was the 30-member council that made it feel larger. 30 people ranged around the great curved table, robes and formal attire. The weight of centuries of interpack governance in the room like a physical presence. Margaret was there, in the center, with the gravity of someone who had been the center of difficult rooms for a very long time and was entirely undisturbed by it. Cade was already seated on one side of the room, with his legal team and the cool composure of someone who had prepared extensively. Mia entered with Ethan beside her and the 5 wolfless witnesses behind her, and Nora at her side, and Theo with his organized binder of documented evidence, and she walked to the witness position in the center of the floor and stood. She felt the room. The council was not hostile exactly, but it was not warm. 30 people, many of whom had known Cade for decades, some of whom benefited from the same power structures he'd been working to consolidate, some of whom were simply cautious, waiting, not yet committed to either version of the story. She felt Nora quietly begin. Not manipulation. Tuning. Like someone setting a tone pure clear, into an instrument that had been slightly out of key. The room didn't change dramatically. It became more itself. More genuinely attentive. The performance of attention dropped away and the actual attention moved in. Margaret called the hearing to order. Cade's legal counsel went first. The case against Mia was competent and thorough, she had to give it that. She had taken documents from the Grey Pine administrative files without authorization. She was a low-ranking pack member with no standing in interpack affairs. Her actions at the summit had been illegal intrusion. The evidence she presented was tainted by the method of its obtaining. The countercomplaint was not a deflection but a legitimate legal challenge that the council was obligated to resolve before proceeding. She listened to all of it. Then she stood. She did not use notes. The council has been asked to decide whether I had the right to do what I did, she said. I want to suggest that's the wrong question. She looked around the table. The right question is, what happens to a system of governance when the only people who can see its flaws are the people the system is designed to exclude? Silence. I am wolfless. I have no wolf, no pack bond, no ranking in the hierarchy that governs every decision made in this room. And because of that, I spent 23 years in positions that kept me close enough to information to be useful but far enough from authority that I couldn't act on what I learned. She paused. The people who put me in those positions thought they were managing a liability. They were actually creating an observer. She looked at Cade. An observer who eventually observed too much. Cade's expression was stone. I want to present 2 things to this council, she continued. The first is evidence, the kind that speaks for itself. Theo. Theo stood and began distributing materials. The historical data on wolfless suppression across the Northern Territories. The pattern charts. The timeline going back 30 years. Council members received them and began reading. Over 30 years, she said, wolfless individuals in positions of pack influence have been systematically removed across the Northern Territories. Not for cause. Not for misconduct. For the specific offense of being able to see clearly. There are 6 packs represented in this room. 3 of them, including Grey Pine, show clear patterns of wolfless displacement in the 5 years prior to each major power consolidation event. She let that sit. That is not coincidence. That is methodology. She picked up the second document. The second thing I want to present is older. She held up the journal. This was written 400 years ago by a woman called Nora, in the Ravenwood archives. She was wolfless. She had the same empathic gift that I have, that the 5 people behind me have, that has been described in pack medical literature as a sensory anomaly, and dismissed as insignificant because it doesn't fit the wolf hierarchy framework. She set it down. It fits a different framework. One Nora described and tried to build and was stopped from building. One that Ravenwood has been quietly rebuilding for 3 years. She looked at the council. I am asking this council not just to address the conspiracy I uncovered. I am asking you to ask why the conspiracy keeps recurring. Why every generation produces the same pattern of wolfless exclusion, the same attempt to remove the unbound view from positions where it might matter. She paused. The answer is in this journal. The answer is 400 years old. And it is still today the most important question in wolf governance. She sat down. The room was absolutely still. Nora beside her was completely quiet, but her gift was in the air of the room like a clear note held long and steady, and every person in that room was fully genuinely present in a way that 30 people in a formal legal proceeding almost never were. Margaret looked at Cade. Do you have a response, she said, to the historical documentation? Cade looked at the papers in front of him, at the pattern charts, at the timeline that ended with his own pack's wolfless members quietly displaced before the summit. The wolfless have no place in pack governance, he said. That is a position I hold honestly, not conspiratorially. They are not wolves. They do not share the pack bond. They cannot understand. They understand precisely what we don't, Margaret said very quietly. Cade stopped. Margaret was looking at the journal. I am 87 years old, she said. I have sat in this hall for more decisions than I can count. I have watched packs rise and fail. I have watched alphas of great power lead their wolves into catastrophe because the current of the bond ran faster than anyone's ability to question it. She looked at the journal. I have wondered for 60 years why we keep making the same mistakes. She paused. I think I may have just been handed the answer. The council deliberated for 5 hours. Mia sat. She breathed. She ran her map of the room, the shifting temperatures of 30 minds working through something genuinely complicated, genuinely new, not already decided, actually thinking. At the end of the 5th hour, Margaret called the session back to order. In the matter of the document complaint, she said, the council finds that while the method of obtaining the correspondence was procedurally irregular, the public interest in preventing the harm the documents revealed outweighs the procedural violation. The complaint is dismissed. She paused. In the matter of the original summit conspiracy, the council affirms the findings of the preliminary investigation and refers the matter to formal trial. She looked at Cade. He met her gaze. Something in him, she noticed, something she felt clearly on her map, was tired. Profoundly, deeply tired. The kind of tired that comes at the end of a very long time maintaining something that shouldn't have been maintained. In the matter of the broader systematic suppression of wolfless individuals in pack governance, Margaret continued, the council will convene a working group to review the historical documentation and the evidence presented today, with the goal of producing within 1 year a formal amendment to the Interpack Accord establishing the rights and roles of wolfless individuals in pack governance. She set down her papers. This is a beginning, not an end. But it is a beginning. She looked at Mia. The blank who became the balance, she said quietly. I read about her once years ago. I thought it was a myth. She was real, Mia said. Yes, Margaret said. I can see that. After the formal session ended, after the legal teams had packed up and the council members had dispersed into smaller conversations and Cade had left with the particular quality of a man walking toward a reckoning he couldn't outrun, Mia stood in the stone hall and felt the room empty out. Theo found her first. You absolute extraordinary disaster, he said warmly and hugged her, and she let herself be hugged, which she rarely did, and it felt like coming home. The 5 wolfless witnesses gathered around. Eli the cartographer was smiling wide and slightly stunned, the smile of someone seeing something they'd given up believing in. The young boy from the Eastern Pack, who'd sat through the whole hearing with his mother's hand in his and had watched Mia stand in the center of the room and talk about what they were, was looking at her with the expression of someone who has just been given back something they didn't know had been taken. She felt it on her map. Each of them, clear and warm and distinct and no longer afraid. Ethan was last. He came across the emptying hall and stopped in front of her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. You were right, he said. About which part? All of it. His voice was quiet. The truth as a plan. It worked. It usually does, she said, when you can actually get people to hear it. He looked at her. That warm, clear bell-tone quality. Not just a single note now but something fuller. Something that had room in it. Mia, he said. Ethan, she said. After tomorrow, he said. Is now. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about everything it had taken to get here. Every year. Every room. Every backseat and empty skin and ghost girl. Every full moon she'd spent on the outside of the current. Every book pressed into her hands. Every piece of knowledge carefully stored for a moment when it would matter. She thought about a girl at 7, standing perfectly still while an elder's face changed, and being curious instead of afraid. Yes, she said. It is. He reached up and tucked her hair back, the way she'd thought about for weeks, gently, like something he'd been careful with and was now allowed to be tender with. She leaned into it just slightly, just enough. The stone hall was nearly empty. The moon was rising outside the windows. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Part 9. Spring arrived at Ravenwood like it always arrived in high country. Sudden, almost aggressive, the snow retreating in a week as if embarrassed to have been there at all, the river running fast and cold and bright, the trees producing leaves with the enthusiasm of something that had been waiting. Mia stood at the window of her office, a room that was hers, on the second floor of the Ravenwood packhouse with a view of the river and the mountains, and looked out at the valley. The office was something she was still getting used to. Not the physical fact of it, but what it meant. Her role on the Ravenwood Mixed Council had become, over the winter, something more formal: Interpack Liaison for Wolfless Affairs, a title that the council had created somewhat awkwardly and that she had accepted without the dignity she'd intended because Theo had been in the room when they announced it and his expression had made her laugh at a very solemn moment. The Wolfless Affairs Working Group had been meeting for 4 months. It was slow work, pack law didn't change quickly, and there were alphas on the broader council who were resistant, who needed time, who needed to see Ravenwood's model working before they believed in it. But it was moving. The formal amendment was taking shape. The rights framework was being drafted. The 5 wolfless witnesses from the hearing had all made decisions about where to go. Eli had come to Ravenwood, was currently, improbably, reorganizing the archive room with the systematic intensity of someone who had found their natural habitat. The young boy from the Eastern Pack had stayed with his mother in their territory for now, but his mother had joined the working group and was one of its most fiercely effective members. The others were scattered, working in different packs, in contact, building the network that Nora had described 400 years ago and never quite got to finish. Nora from Silver Run, had stayed at Ravenwood for 3 months. She had left for home last week to her own pack to try to build something there. She had hugged Mia at the door and said, "I'm going to make them hear the instruments out of tune." "I know you are," Mia had said. "You should come visit." "I will." They had held each other for a moment, 2 people who shared something that didn't have a precise name in the existing vocabulary. And then Nora had gone. Kate's trial had concluded in February. She had not attended. She had given her testimony in writing and had Ethan present it on her behalf, because she had decided that she was done spending her energy in rooms where Cade was the center of the story. He was convicted on 3 counts: conspiracy to manipulate interpack governance, misuse of alpha authority, systematic suppression of pack member rights. He was stripped of his alpha title and his pack had voted in new leadership, a young female wolf named Kayla, who was in a development that had given Mia a very complicated few days of feeling when she heard it, apparently doing a genuinely good job. Kayla, who had called her empty skin from the time they were 8 years old. Kayla, who had sent a message through official channels, 2 weeks after her installation, that said simply, "I owe you an apology. I know that doesn't cover what was done. I'm going to try to be better. I hope you'll let me." Mia had thought about it for a long time. Then she had written back, "I don't need the apology. But the better, yes. Be better. That matters." She had not heard back yet. She was not sure she needed to. Her mother came to Ravenwood in March. Eva Dawson arrived with 2 suitcases and the expression of someone who had been very frightened for a very long time, and was very carefully allowing herself to stop. She looked at the pack house and the valley and the river, and she looked at Mia, and she said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You look different." "I am different," Mia said. "No," Eva said, with the precision of a woman who had been watching her daughter for 27 years. "You look the same. You've always looked like this. You just have room to show it now." Mia had to look away briefly. "Come inside," she said. "I want to show you the herb garden. Eli is very proud of the herb garden." "Eli," Eva said, following her. "Is he the young man with the maps on every wall?" "Yes." "And the other one? With the glasses who keeps reorganizing things?" "That's Theo. He's always been like that." Eva was quiet for a moment. "You have people," she said. "Yes," Mia said. "I have people." Her mother made a sound. Small. Satisfied. The sound of someone who had been waiting for a specific thing and had finally heard it. The evening that she would always think of as the beginning, not the summit, not the hearing, not any of the formal milestones, was a Thursday in late April, ordinary in every way except that the world was warm and the river was audible through the open window, and Ethan found her in the council room after the evening session had cleared out. She had stayed behind. She did that sometimes, stayed in the council room after meetings in the quiet with the papers and the day's work, because she had spent 23 years working in rooms that weren't hers and she was still adjusting to the feeling of rooms that were. He came in and sat down across from her. Set 2 cups of tea on the table. Said nothing. She looked at him. He looked at her. "I keep thinking about something Nora wrote," she said. "Which part?" "The part about the gift. About standing outside the wolf entirely, and therefore being able to see what those inside can't." She paused. She made it sound like a solitary thing. Like the position of standing outside was permanent. Like you couldn't stand outside and inside simultaneously. He was quiet. "But I don't think that's true," she said. I think what the gift does isn't keep you outside. I think it keeps you honest about what you see when you're inside." She met his eyes. And you can be inside. You can belong to something. You can be part of a pack, part of a home, part of a person, and still see clearly. If the thing you're part of is built honestly. He looked at her for a long moment. Like Ravenwood, he said. Like Ravenwood, she agreed. A pause. Like this. He reached across the table. She put her hand in his. I have wanted to tell you something for months, he said. Tell me now. I spent 11 years building this pack with one idea in the back of my mind, he said. That if I built it right, someone would come who could see what I was trying to build better than I could see it myself. He looked at her steadily. I didn't expect to also fall completely in love with her. She looked at him. The river ran outside the window. The moon was somewhere above the clouds, patient and silver and very old. Ethan, she said. Mia. I see you too, she said. That's what I want you to know. All of it. The weight of what you carry and the way you choose to carry it. The questions you ask instead of the orders you could give. The 11 years of building something honest in a system that rewards dishonesty. She paused. I see it. I see you. He stood. Came around the table. She stood too, and they were very close, and the space between them had been closing for months in the way that true things close, slowly, irreversibly, without either person quite marking the exact moment. He put his hand against her jaw very carefully, the way you touch something you have been afraid of breaking and have finally decided to trust yourself with. She leaned into it. Okay, he said softly. Okay, she said. And that was that. 6 months later, at the first formal meeting of the newly established Wolfless Affairs Council, 8 members, 6 packs represented, Mia chairing, the amendment passed. It was not everything. No single document ever is. It was a beginning. A formal recognition that wolfless individuals had standing in pack governance, that the empathic gift was documented and real and protected, that no pack could exile a member on the sole basis of wolflessness without council review. A beginning. She stood at the front of the room and looked at the 8 people around the table, 8 people who had spent their lives in the margins of a system that didn't have space for them, 8 people who were here now making space, and she thought of Nora writing in her journal in the 17th year of an accord that collapsed in the 20th. We are the ones who can say stop. That is not an absence. That is a purpose. The amendment passes, she said. And her voice was steady and warm and full. The voice of someone who had finally completely found the room they'd always been built for. The room applauded. Ethan in the back row. He was there to observe, not to chair. This was her room, caught her eye. She smiled. He smiled back. Small. True. The smile of a man watching someone he loves be fully, finally, completely themselves. She shifted for the first time at 27 at midsummer, alone in the meadow behind the pack house on a night when the moon was full and the air was thick with pine and the river was loud and the whole world felt right. The particular rightness that comes not from everything being perfect but from everything being honest. She had not expected it. Had long ago stopped expecting it. The gift had felt like compensation, like the thing she'd gotten instead of the wolf, and she had made her peace with that because the gift was extraordinary and she knew what she was. But the wolf had been there. All along. Late. Outrageously late. Spectacularly, almost comically late. Waiting, as the wolves born to her bloodline apparently did, for exactly the right moment. She was silver. Not gray silver like moonlight on water, like the inside of a cloud, like something that caught light and gave it back changed. She ran. She ran through the meadow and into the trees and along the river bank, and after a while she felt Ethan's wolf beside her, dark as midnight, warm as summer, solid and true, running with her through the silver summer dark. The pack heard and howled. She threw her head back and howled back. For the first time in her life, 27 years in the making, she howled with her pack. And the sound that came out of her was not what she'd expected. It was not the sound of something that had been absent. It was not the sound of something finally arriving. It was the sound of something that had always been there, always been true, finally given voice. There is a version of every story where the one born different is the one who should have been born different. Where the absence is not an absence at all. Where the thing you've been told you're missing is the thing you were always carrying. You have been paying attention for your whole life. You have been reading the room from the bank. You have been hearing the instruments out of tune. That is not a deficiency. That is a gift. That is a purpose. And the pack that deserves you, the home that deserves you, is the one that sees that. Don't settle for anything less. Dan. Oh my goodness. We made it. We actually made it to the end and I genuinely have chills. If this story moved you, if Mia moved you, I need you to drop a comment right now. Tell me your favorite moment. Was it when she walked into that summit and sat down? When the journal revealed what the wolfless truly were? When her wolf finally came in the meadow at midsummer? I want to know everything. And if you are not subscribed yet, I am asking you as sincerely as I know how, please subscribe. This channel is built on stories exactly like this one, and there is so much more coming. Hit the bell so you never miss a single one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the whole thing. You are exactly the kind of person these stories are made for. Until next time, know what you are. Own what you see. And never ever let anyone tell you that your difference is a deficiency. Red Heart Wolf Face.